This new holiday-shortened week got underway with day 1040 of the Trump administration. Late today, a federal judge issued a ruling that may make it tougher for the Trump side to keep their people out of courtrooms and hearing rooms. This is the case of former White House counsel Don McGahn, a critical witness. He's quoted or cited nearly 160 times in the final draft of the Mueller report. He indeed is one of the unwitting narrators of the Mueller report. Well, tonight, Judge Jackson of the Federal District Court in D.C. ruled that Don McGahn must comply with a subpoena from House Judiciary and testify about Trump's efforts to obstruct the Mueller investigation. She writes the Justice Department's, quote, claim to unreviewable absolute testimonial immunity is baseless and as such cannot be sustained. Stated simply, the primary takeaway from the past 250 years of recorded American history is that presidents are not kings. You may recall the House Judiciary Committee went to court in August to enforce its subpoena, which the president promptly blocked. McGahn has returned to his old law firm now of Jones Day in D.C. He's been out of the White House since early 2017. His attorney says he'll testify unless a stay is granted. Tonight, the Justice Department alerted us it will appeal the ruling while trying also to block its enforcement. Yet the ruling sends a clear message to other current and former officials who are high-value witnesses but have not testified, and that would include Mulvaney and Bolton. Tonight, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff says he's open to hearing more witnesses, but adds his committee plans to submit its report on the investigation to Judiciary sometime next week, that it could include an article of impeachment based on obstruction of Congress. Amid all of these developments, there is new reporting from the Washington Post that an internal review over at the White House has unearthed emails between the chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, and budget officials about finding possible legal reasons for withholding that aid to Ukraine that was approved by Congress. Now, these were in August after Trump's July 25 phone call with the new Ukrainian president. There is also new reporting on the criminal investigation surrounding those two associates of Rudy Giuliani, Lev and Igor. The Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post are reporting that federal prosecutors are exploring a wider range of potential crimes here than we previously knew about, including but not limited to money laundering, obstruction of justice, wire fraud, and failure to register as a foreign agent as part of its investigation. They're also reporting the feds are scrutinizing Giuliani's consulting business and looking at donations made to a pro-Trump super PAC. Tonight, Giuliani's own lawyer says his client has not received any subpoena requests and adds that he's done nothing wrong. This weekend, Giuliani was back on cable, and he was asked about his recent contact with his client and friend, Donald Trump.
I do not discuss my conversations with my client. You can assume that I talk to him early and often and have a very, very good relationship with him. And all of these comments, which are totally insulting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen things written like, he's going to throw me under the bus.
Right.
When they say that, I say, he isn't, but I have insurance. I mean,
Okay.
It is ridiculous. We are very good friends. He knows what I did was in order to defend him, not to dig up dirt on Biden. This goes back a year ago before Biden hadn't even decided to run for president.
Shortly after that, he sent out this message about that insurance comment, and we quote, "Truth alert, the statement I've made several times of having an insurance policy if thrown under the bus is sarcastic and relates to the files in my safe about the Biden family's 4-decade monetizing of his office. If I disappear, I will appear immediately along with my RICO chart." This afternoon, Trump was asked about his thoughts on his lawyer's words.
What do you make of Rudy Giuliani saying he has insurance?
Oh, I don't know. Rudy's a great guy. I think that maybe the press isn't treating Rudy very well, and I think that's unfair. But Rudy was a great mayor and a great crime fighter.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.